Hello and welcome to Automate It, our Polymath Robotics weekly podcast where we talk about robots and all sorts of things. I, of course, am Stefan Ilia, CEO and co-founder of Polymath Robotics.
With me is Ilia the Bear Anoth.
Also a new fan of Pacifico, so
who's one of our great sponsors today. You know, we're what, 10 episodes into a podcast, and we figured why not get a major beer company to sponsor us?
I mean, why go with Audible like everybody else?
Yeah,
gotta go do something interesting.
So again, this is Automate It, and every week we talk about robots, how to make them, and how they usually unmake us. We have two sections of the show, and to start off with is my favorite, where we play a game where we spitball through a robotics startup idea. After that, we'll go diving into what exactly is a robotics MVP. What things can you make in robotics with less than, say, $100,000 that might prove you have a real company. So to start off the game today, Ilia, is there a place that we're going to be?
Yeah, let's pick a setting here, totally at random, and it's going to be in space.
Cool. And in space, what type of robots are we going to be building? What type of technologies are we going to be using? I think we're just going to do autonomous vehicles. Looks like the car I drove. Something near the card I drew, something near and dear to my heart. But how do we make autonomous vehicles in space? Now, I mean,
like
I think
space or on a planet, like a moon.
I mean, it could be either. I mean, there is a Tesla floating around in space.
I feel like all rocket ships are autonomous. Like nobody's there sitting on a 9-month journey to Mars. Nobody's sitting at the control the whole time.
Like set of jobs that big robotics has taken away from us.
I think
of the hardworking rocket pilots, who could have been tuning themselves to do sub-millisecond corrections.
I think the age of autonomous long-haul spacecraft is already here. In fact, has never not been here because you don't have to watch for pedestrians in the middle of
not yet
space.
Not yet.
Maybe let's send her on like a moon or something, or Mars.
I think that we should put money in a bank account to pay a payoff to the family of the first jaywalker killed in space.
Yes,
because of this comment. So someone going on a spacewalk, and boom, autonomous rocket comes by, mows them down.
Okay,
and then there's the autonomous trolley problem. If the rocket's heading towards the first person, do you retarget it to take out the remnants of the ISS? These are the problems we need to be talking about.
I will put exactly $1 in my bank account.
Yep,
and by the time at 1% interest rate this becomes ever a problem, it'll probably be worth $50 trillion.
There we go.
And it'll be 5,000 years later and money will be meaningless. But yeah, sure. Let's go.
All right, Star Trek. All right, so putting things in space is stupidly expensive. The heuristic I always like is that it costs roughly as much to put an object in space as the value of that object in gold. So if you want to put a 50-pound weight, a 50-pound barbell in space, it costs whatever 50 pounds worth of gold costs, which is not cheap. So before you order your Bowflex to space, you might want to consider that. So I think, like, if we were to say colonize the moon, it really comes down to how few things can we send there, and how few people could we send to the moon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So autonomous machines in space for sure. I read this awesome article. I've been trying to find it. It was a study done by some NASA engineers about basically like sensitivity analysis for how much it would cost. And their whole premise was based on setting up complex components like CPUs for a long time because they're tiny and complicated. But bulk materials, you quickly develop your industry to kind of develop more and more advanced ones. You start with like really simple stuff, like sand to make regolith to make a pillar, or
regolith to make a really crappy wheel.
Exactly. Like, I mean,
if you can rebuild your wheels every day, who cares if they kind of disintegrate after 3 days?
Yeah, and like the number they came out to, I'm going to lie because I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 2 to 3x the total cost of the space station, the International Space Station, which is a lot of money. But like for starting an industry
to build enough stuff on the moon to get going,
to get going for a self-sustaining industry, which is a lot of money, but it's not actually an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah, especially given the setting,
low.
Especially given the astro setting.
Exactly. With a 4-second time delay to the moon, you would want most of this to be autonomous instead of teleoperated.
Yeah. Oh,
so your
certainly.
machines need to actually drive themselves around.
But and like that's probably okay, because as you mentioned, there's not going to be jaywalkers.
Yeah.
And like realistically, if there's a deposit of hydrogen over here and a deposit of iron over there, you're probably finding in lunar industry 1.0 the best deposit of iron.
Yeah.
And you are having your crappy equipment move stuff to and from it, where it's probably driving for 40 hours straight at 3 miles an hour with a bunch of solar panels collecting all the energy.
Yeah. Best part about the moon, no weather.
Yeah.
The scenery is static. So you can localize perfectly against optical features because they're not going to change for the next 10,000 years, aside from the odd asteroid.
The worst part, though, is that, of course, as Robert Heinlein said, it is a harsh mistress. So it's a little back and forth with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you could have basically kind of dumb robots hauling iron, hauling deuterium, hauling whatever from one side of the moon to another, and then have a relatively simple facility that is the core, like where humans do complicated things with their fingers location.
Yeah, it'd probably be around one of the poles.
Why?
Because ice is most likely around the lunar poles, and the poles get sunlight mostly year round. Whereas the rest of the moon, you get 2 weeks of darkness, and all your solar panel robots are going to have to either sleep or die.
They can just chill out.
Yeah, so your productivity drops to 0 for 2 solid weeks out of every 4. It's going to be pretty bad. Whereas in the polar regions, you get permanent sunlight, you get ice, which is very useful.
Well, I mean, like, just think about that. Like, you're going to want to more regularly get stuff back and forth. So probably at some point. So, like, I look at this as you send a bunch of really nice first-gen robots up, and then you start Frankensteining them with replacement crappy parts. So, like, compressed regolith into a wheel type of thing. But at a certain point, stopping for 2 weeks no longer seems logical. Why not, like, build a train between Lunar Station North and Ferris Point 7 and just have a bunch of solar panels along the way powering that train?
You could do all of that.
Yep.
Or you could just use nuclear power. And be drastically more efficient.
But what happens if you Chernobyl it? All the locals will be really upset.
Yeah, those lunar Greenpeace. if Greenpeace can get a protest on the moon, more power to them.
Yep.
Like, only good for us.
They probably will after Hancock carves a big logo into the middle of it.
There was a good Arthur C. Clarke story about like launching sulfur into the high atmosphere for study, and it was going to be luminous, and at the last second it becomes, it shows up in the atmosphere and it's a giant Coca-Cola logo because somebody had paid off some engineer to stick a little template in the thing. So I'm sure that would happen.
And you can look at Making Sunsets, who recently had some negative press in MIT Tech Review, who were looking to do the same thing on Earth. All right, so let's say we wanted to build ourselves a train autonomously between Lunar Station North.
Trains are the easiest autonomy problem.
Well, no.
You're literally on rails.
Sorry, but what's not easy is
building. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think my thesis, which I believe we share, is we're not really putting 10,000 dual PhDs on Lunar City North. We're more putting maybe 100, 200 of those, but most likely 800, 5,000, whatever. Really skilled technicians.
Yep.
Like the guys and gals where you take your car into a shop and they rebuild the whole thing. The types of folks who are in Cuba who've been keeping big cars running for 100 years. So how exactly would you build what series of robots would you need to build that type of train that can be maintained by that sort of population?
Yeah, I think you'd have to start your architecture in such a way that you reduce the amount of components. So what you do is every big robot is just an assembly of smaller components from smaller robots, which isn't terribly efficient, but is super replaceable.
Yeah.
Right? A big robot needs 6 motors, a small robot
so you don't
needs
have
1.
a diversity of SKUs.
Exactly. Because the space industry for human life and cost necessity has made everything super specialized, super need a PhD to operate it kind of thing. You want kind of the equivalent of space Lego bricks.
Yeah.
That, like, if a brick breaks, you just pull another brick.
Yep.
And that requires quite a lot of engineering on our side.
Yep. Basically, you need generic small motor number 7.
Exactly. Not even number 7. You have like 4 motor models, and that's it.
Small sized motor that they can be easily made and highly reliable and swapped in and out.
Exactly. And so we make it as modular as possible. We make it as simple to maintain as possible, which is non-trivial.
Yep.
I think from the autonomy standpoint, we need localization against existing features. You don't get GPS unless you want to launch GPS.
But wouldn't it be
satellites.
relatively cheap to launch some nanosats doing GPS?
The problem is you don't really have a geostationary orbit around the moon, right? Because all of them get disrupted by the
Earth.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Earth is kind of a jerk.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Or,
there's some astrophysicists out there slamming their head.
We could make this robotics problem easier by just blowing up the Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't. But you don't really need it. Like you can localize so well against existing features that you don't really need a magic system if you just have a good photogrammetry.
Yeah. And actually, I wonder if you could do that against constellations because there's no atmosphere.
Exactly.
You just have a decently high resolution camera facing up and saying, oh, here's where the math is.
That's actually how a lot of satellites position themselves.
Yeah.
It's that exact trick.
So, I think the easiest question is how do we make money off of this army of robots colonizing the moon? Step 1, NASA pays all our bills. Step 2, Space Force finds a reason to. And then step 3, as they did in Robert Heinlein's Moon is a Harsh, Harsh Mistress, we obviously grow grain on the moon and use a space catapult to shoot it back to Earth.
Yes.
That is obviously the best industry that could ever be on the moon.
Grain on the moon.
Yep.
Definitely sounds like a reasonable thing.
We're coming for you, Kansas.
I'm just saying, Coca-Cola, hit us up for a sponsorship. We'll draw a giant logo on the moon.
If you pay money to Polymath now, if any of our robots are ever on the moon, we will deface it against all humanity for you.
And we will also claim it was an accident. So on that note, what are we calling this monstrosity?
Polymath's Lunar Tagging Expedition number 4.
No, come on.
I don't know if we're packaging this one up. I think
big cheese.
I think this is just Big Cheese Industries.
Yeah, Big Cheese Industries. Sure, let's go with that.
All right. And with that being said, I think we can transition over to what we're actually talking about today, which is how you build an MVP. So, given that we're just talking about space stuff, I've met in the past companies who were funded not to the tune of $10+ million, trying to build robots, trying to build lunar robots. And yeah, it's kind of hard to do that when you don't have $20 million to put things on the moon.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious two-step approach here is you start in sim as much as you can, and you use simulation to kind of get your basics going, and then you build land-based equivalents, right? Like NASA, Canada Space Agency.
But when you're thinking about a robotics MVP, it's not just can an arm do this? It's like if an arm does this, if a rover can do this, the market will buy it on a consistent cadence. Yeah. MVP has also been bastardized to mean I made a crappy thing. It proves that you're interested in buying it. Yeah. Therefore, boom, now I raise my $1 billion to have a 20-year science experiment.
Yeah.
MVP in SaaS land is I built a really simple app and people have been paying me and now I need to build it better that more people will pay me.
Yeah, the best analogy I've heard is if you're building an MVP for a bicycle, you can spend all your money to make a really great tire, or you can make 2 crappy tires and a crappy chain and a crappy frame, and they could both cost the same amount, but you really need a full bicycle to prove out a bicycle. If you spend all your time building the wheel, which in the robotics case is building the basic autonomy layer or the hardware, you haven't actually proved out why people.
Honestly, in robotics, it can be a lot of things. It can be the special arm. It can be the special VR setting.
Exactly. Yeah. So engineers, including myself, will often spend the time polishing that one component because that's the interesting, weird part.
And think about how good that component's going to need to be when we sell 1 billion units.
Exactly. Yeah. That kind of thinking.
That's why we need this perfect wheel. Because when Lance Armstrong and Goodyear are talking about best tires for their different use cases, we need to engineer a product that will make it ours in both.
That's right. Also, Lance Armstrong's both in cycling and in space, so
it all connects. Well, let's say another one of our examples of startups from the game that are a little easier to get to than space. So we talked a couple weeks ago about a robot to deliver food to people in stadiums.
Yeah.
Is one that sticks out.
Yeah.
So what could be the simplest possible MVP for that? We don't need to prove that people will buy concessions from their seat.
Yeah, I think there's enough data about that.
Been there, done that. I think we essentially need to prove that, hey, at this price point, the stadium will pay us to install this thing. And that price point is no more than, 50% our bill of materials.
Yeah. I mean, I would, if I was going to do it from a business case, we talked about needing an app so that you don't do cash transactions. I would just guerrilla launch the app, not even talk to the stadium. Launch the app,
But then
have a person walking around.
But then
go
you're
bring it.
proving not the robot. You're proving that people would use an app to order food at a stadium.
So that's one component, right? And you prove out the income portion of the question.
Yeah.
And then you pay your guy a reasonable amount, but then you figure out how much the actual equipment will cost relative to that.
Yeah.
So you're kind of proving both questions at once. Is it technically feasible, and is it business case feasible?
So I think that's all well and good. I mean, I went down this path with my last company where we built a operating business for running an autonomous trucking company while building autonomous trucks. And we found that we mostly just confused investors who were like, well, if the software to run this fleet, then why are you even bothering with the robotics? And wow, the robotics seems really hard. Why are you even bothering to try and build a thing? So if the question is how do you build a robotics MVP, I don't think you get to build an app. If the MVP is the whole service, then you kind of have to buy the robot. Yeah. Or if the product is the robot, then you have to buy the app. And buying the app might mean you trade a large portion of your margins to the app company in exchange for distribution.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So let's say, there are some in-seat entertainment or in-seat food delivery apps that exist in stadiums. Let's say they're your actual customer. They have distribution. They can say, we serve this. We serve Oracle Park in San Francisco. We can look into talking to the stadium about installing one of your robots. At the end of the POC period, you'll need to prove that this is better than a human.
Yeah.
So how do you go about building that robot to be better than a human in that time period?
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, it's real rough. Again, especially from our last.
I think now's a good time to mention that last week I did some PitchBook research, and robotics VC investment is down precipitously from 2021 highs, down to the tune of 40% because, as Ilia said, that's rough.
Robots are hard. Yeah. So, I mean, speaking as an engineer, I'd love to start testing in phases. Mm-hmm. And from our episode when we talked about the stadium, you really actually got to worry more about people shoving you, people dumping stuff on you, more than anything else. So I would start with an empty stadium, just prove out that the robot can walk to an arbitrary point. Mm-hmm. Not get lost, and can deposit something.
Well, so when we did, as a reminder for listeners who haven't committed every episode to memory, the challenge was it had to be a walking robot.
Yeah.
And our idea was like one of those monsters from Toy Story.
Max's Mavens.
Yeah, one of Max's weird robots, where it was a walking robot that basically had a gantry crane on top of it to deliver food to somebody. Now, a friend of the show and I were catching up after that episode, and his suggestion was that we actually just use a rail system to move down the row. And maybe, in fact, we don't even do walking, or we walk and then mate with the rail system that's at like people's feet. And that's how we get the food the rest of the way. So then we just have to very slowly walk up the stairs and mate with preset docking stations.
The rail. I feel like a rail would just clobber people. I feel like you're pretty tight in stadiums. Yeah.
Oh, you certainly are.
Yeah.
Yeah. so to be clear, I think this is like a rail that sits on the back of each chair.
Yeah.
Right in the head of it.
Right at perfect like concussion generating space.
Yep.
Where your head is.
So maybe your walking robot inserts this tray on a single rail onto the rail. This is then a secondary robot.
You know how you make your robot problems easier? Instead of building one robot, you build two robots. Now you have half as many problems, I guarantee.
Yeah, this seems less good. So maybe what it is it goes on the rail, and then you have sensing from the standing robot, and the standing robot is actuating something in the rail to move this to position.
Yeah. I still like my crane idea. All right. So, but I mean, MVP wise, like we want to prove out that the robot can even theoretically work. I think asking a stadium to build railing into seats is a high bar.
Well, I mean, they're starting with a single section.
Even a single section might be a little rough.
Yeah.
It's expensive. You have some questions on.
All right. So let's say we're back to a walking gantry crane.
Yeah. Yeah. So walking gantry crane, right? So test it out when it's empty.
Yeah.
Show a video, get the space's permission, or even heck, test it out on a university bleachers. Mm-hmm. small scale, and show that it can theoretically operate in perfect scenarios. And stop there would be my recommendation, because the real difficulty starts with like, how do you handle a giant guy dumping soda on you?
I mean, I think again though, we're still not a viable product if we only work in perfect situations.
No, of course, you're not. But
I mean, so in this case, you solved walking. You've solved walking in crowded upstairs environments.
Yep.
You've solved gantry crane with a basket that's weighed down with things like beer and soda that
doesn't fall over.
That the wind never swings it into people.
Yep.
We've solved those problems, and we still don't really even have a viable product to sell.
Yeah, because after all that, it's probably gonna be a little bit expensive.
It's still a $500,000 device.
Yeah.
To solve a $50,000 a year person.
I mean, the one way to make it cheaper is get rid of the legs, right?
Yeah.
Is just use treads and be able to get up there and
I'm wondering if
there's
an easier example we could talk about than something that we came up with as hard. So maybe to switch gears into things that people have worked on. Let's say a delivery robot.
Yeah.
So we could be aiming for a campus delivery robot.
Well, just delivery robots in general. I mean, they've been having a very successul time recently. Hasn't been a lot of shuttered delivery robot companies from FedEx or Amazon.
Yeah.
So very successful business model. On that note, though, FedEx's delivery robot was very impressive to me because it actually solved the stair problem in a very elegant way. If you're interested in the mechanical engineering, look up FedEx's kind of delivery robot system.
So
I guess the fundamental question, though, is what do you define as MVP for a robot, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, can you prove out that you can fuse sensor data? Yes. Nobody really cares. Can you prove out that it's not going to hit obstacles? Yes. Still, nobody really cares.
Yep.
What you got to show is your robot can do a functional work that your customer actually cares about.
Yep.
The stadium example, it's getting food to the person. However, it doesn't matter, right? Even if it's an idealized scenario, showing the owner, if they can sit in their seat, the robot zips over some food to them, even in an empty stadium. Pretty powerful demo in a lot of ways.
So maybe we talk about not even normal delivery robot, a super delivery robot, a bike lane delivery robot.
Oh, I thought you were going to go back to our sewer pipes delivery robot from a previous episode. All right, bike lane delivery robot.
So bike lane delivery robot. There's a couple of these companies around. Neuro is the most well known of them, mostly focusing on like suburban settings or large campus settings. Let's say in this case that you're using a Postmates or a Instacart or whatever to actually generate demand for you. So they dispatch you to places they know that you can drive.
Mm-hmm.
All that's solved.
Sure. All the infrastructure is solved.
Yep.
It's the easy part.
Yeah. How do we get to MVP?
We'll get to MVP. So
MVP is and MVP is still, I mean, I think I understand your point about like redefining MVP, but kind of that's why the industry's a loser.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, hey, don't grade me on the bell curve of all the companies who make money. Give me a special bell curve to compare me against a bunch of people who make no money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the cheat that a lot of delivery machines have used recently is they're not actually autonomous, right? Like they're just teleop.
Yep.
Driven usually by, lower wage countries.
But Ilia, why would you use teleop? It's such a stupid technology. Next week, someone's going to solve all machine learning problems.
So while they're polishing the front wheel of their bicycle, you build the whole bicycle and you show actual functional for-profit work.
As an AI investor at a prominent VC firm told me in 2019, that's an interim solution, Ilia. And it will be fully replaced within 6 months.
Awesome. When it is, we will be there with a delivery network. And, if we even want to spice it up for the investor, we'll say, what we're doing? We're capturing data from these drivers.
Oh,
we're going to train our magical ML
people
model
love that.
To replace those drivers someday.
Okay.
Right? So that's the gist.
So, all right. So our MVP, let's say, is just fully teleoped.
Yeah, it's it's basically a go-kart with a cell radio and some cameras and a box to put stuff in.
Okay.
And that's it. That's the whole thing.
So in terms of things that you need to build on this go-kart, you still need to build all the low-level controllers.
Yeah.
You still need to build you need to build a safety system that at least knows if you're not getting routine messages from the teleop station.
Yeah.
Oh, also as a big nice secret for everybody, running teleop over LTE is rather expensive unless you have a large partnership with an LTE provider.
Yeah.
So I'd also be expecting in the range of $3,000 to $10,000 a month of cell phone bills.
I got to call out something really cool that one of our team members, Naveen, did. which I was super impressed by before he joined us here. He was trying to do something similar for scooters that would drive themselves around. So, you know,
to reposition them.
To reposition
for
exactly.
demand.
Yeah. So, you know, somebody gets off their scooter in the middle of nowhere, the scooter drives itself back to a busy intersection. Great. The thing that he did there, which I loved, is on board, he would gather a little bit of camera data and send just ML descriptors back to the teleop driver. And the other end of it would basically ML hallucinate the scenery around the scooter. So he's using ML for compression, and it's not always true to life because it's a, you know, generative AI image. So you're going to get weird artifacts and stuff. But it was incredibly efficient and worked. Like it worked well enough for people to drive the scooters around. So that's an awesome, clever solution for the compression problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get this MVP working, you use some clever hacks like that. So it's not spend $1 billion. You buy an electric go-kart. You build a really nice set of fairings that sits on top of it.
Yeah.
So that you look like you're part of the future. And yeah, you're probably 40, 60K away from having a product that all you need is a big Postmates partnership. And you need to build an API that talks to their API to dispatch loads to you.
I mean, you could, or you could just ask them to have a guy call your center to say, bring package A to
Or you could be the guy.
Or you could be the guy.
You could use the Postmates app. And dispatch the vehicle manually and spoof the GPS location on your phone to be wherever the vehicle is.
Nothing drives founders better than suffering the pain of their customers. No, seriously. Like, I'm half joking, but like seriously though, like the most important thing a founder can do is live through the pain of what they're trying to solve for their customers. If they dog food their own stuff.
That feels a lot like the pain I've been experiencing trying to come up with a buildable MVP with less than $1 million.
Yeah. That sounds very familiar. But yeah, living through that pain and nothing will force you to improve your code or automation more than having to do a step manually and having to use your own code 1,000 times a day, where like every single second spent and every extra click is pain to your soul.
All right. So with the pain to the soul, that's how you build an MVP of a delivery bot. So like extrapolating that out a little bit more, I suspect that there are whole flavors of robotics where nothing that kind of at all follows the Eric Ries MVP rules exists.
Can you dive into those?
So Eric Ries wrote the Lean Startup, and like that is you sell customers product before you've built it. They pay for it, and you figure out a way to move heaven and earth to make the crappy app work by the time they start using it. It works well enough that they can start having other friends use it, and you basically get yourself into technical debt, but business progress. Whereas most of robotics is technical progress, business debt. And then when the business debt comes through, your SPAC goes underwater.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's businesses that Eric Ries model shouldn't work for, like blood testing, right? Like that kind of stuff you shouldn't do. But
I mean, I would go so far as to say though, that like the investing community doesn't really know how to bet on folks who can't follow that model.
Exactly. So there's a fine balance to run. You know, one of the things I like here at Polymath is Stefan and I are always discussing kind of two ends of the same problem, where there has to be a kind of a technical clever hack to get around a short-term limitation and a business clever hack to get around how do we scale, how do we build stuff faster. But you do have to keep in mind robots being physically embodied are going to be more expensive and a little bit more dangerous and harder to manage than software. You kind of have to you can be really clever, but you're never going to get around the fact that a robot is a physical object, as clever as you are.
Which makes one go to think that for the spaces where the founder's name is not sufficient to raise $5 to $50 million, and honestly more targeting towards the higher end of that, things like walking robots might just be
a non-starter.
You might just need to buy everything and iterate on it later.
Yeah, I mean the other path there is you incubate at a university and you have a professor who spent the last 10 years.
And your university owns 25% of the company, and that's always really popular with investors.
That's why I went to Waterloo. They don't do that. Shout out to Canada, Waterloo. Anyway, yeah, but like Cassie, the walking robot, came out of some really good walking machine research that had been going on for a decade and a half.
Yeah, that
kind of stuff you can't fund with investor money. You got to fund with long-term.
People have tried to fund that type of thing with investor money.
Yeah, it's not going to work. But Cassie's really cool. If you see that machine, great walking platform, lots of good innovations. But that took, it looks like it's an overnight success. That took decades and decades.
So on the other hand, if you want to build a business that makes you rich and have a yacht and ideally an island with a restrictive entry policy, then you probably need to move faster than decades and university stuff.
Yes.
You probably need to say, what is the core part of this MVP that I care about? Whether it is the way that we're turning a go-kart into a delivery vehicle, or this particular perception model, or the fact that there's a robot in this space at all, and you probably need to buy everything else. Unless you are not even a 10x engineer, but a billion-x engineer.
Yeah, exactly. In this example, maybe you do buddy up to Boston Dynamics or Cassie or whoever to get your walking machine.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I think it would still be a spot is what, 150 grand, 200 grand. So if your stadium robot was a spot with a gantry crane on top, you'd still have to learn how to be really smart about autonomous gantry cranes, and your thing would be meaningfully harder, or your thing would be meaningfully more expensive, but like maybe that could work.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're like, 3 people in a dream, you probably can't build a stadium walking robot.
Yeah, not without significant financing.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, suggestion, avoid legs. Treads, much cheaper.
Oh yeah.
Much less likely to get knocked over. We're working with some companies that just develop treaded platforms for different applications.
Treaded platforms that can go upstairs.
Yeah, can go through a door going upstairs.
Because actually, those folks, they found, hey, we could build a manipulator to open a doorknob, or we could just blast down the door, and one of those is significantly easier.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that has it for this discussion. Next week, I think it's going to be a really nice vibe around here because someone's not going to be here.
Thanks.
Ilia is going to be off, and we're going to have a guest who we have not yet figured out who. So
Surprise.
If you've been listening to this podcast and you get an email the next week, you should keep your DMs open, as they say in the cool circles.
Stefan's going to sneak into your DMs.
Slide into your DMs.
There you go. Oh, I don't even know the cool kids language. Yeah. God damn it.
A generation TikTok, baby. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening to Automate It, and we'll see you next week.
See you next time.